Enver had risen through the ranks and had become a general and minister of war, while he remained only a lieutenant colonel. With the rising conflict in Europe, Kemal was aware of the approaching World War. Britain's negligence and refusal to cooperate with the Young Turks, coupled with the infiltration of the Ottoman army by the German military mission, created a rapprochement between the puppet Sultan and the German Kaiser, Wilhelm II. Not respecting the Germans or their military skills, Mustafa Kemal, without success, insisted on staying neutral. For many years, he had been waiting for his moment to come. World War I would give it to him. Despite Mustafa Kemal's warnings, the Ottoman Empire entered the war on the side of Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, against the Triple Entente of Great Britain, Russia, and France. After the standstill in the 350-mile Western Front and the realization that this was to be a long and arduous war, all eyes turned to the east.
The Russians at the end of December 1914 were under great pressure in the Caucasus, and they sent a message asking the French and the British if they could do something to help draw Turkish forces away from the Caucasus. And this was the final catalyst in precipitating what became the Dardanelles and ultimately the Gallipoli campaign.
With the strong lobbying of Winston Churchill, on February the 5th, 1915, the British War Committee ordered an attack to force the Dardanelles and capture Istanbul. Only 3 days before, Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal was posted to the Gallipoli Peninsula in command of the 19th Division. An event going unnoticed at the time was to change the outcome of the whole campaign. Just a few miles from the ancient city of Troy lay the Straits of Dardanelles and the Gallipoli Peninsula, which had witnessed the legends of Alexander the Great and Jason and the Argonauts. The straits linked the Aegean to Istanbul, which was connected to Tsarist Russia by the Bosphorus. The historical question of Napoleon remained. Who will hold Istanbul? February the 19th, assembling the greatest naval armada witnessed by the Mediterranean, the Allies began their attack on the Dardanelles. Confronted by heavy counterfire from the Turkish forts and mobile guns, the Allies withdrew. After consecutive unsuccessful attacks on February the 25th and in the first week of March, the Allies postponed the operation. Winston Churchill, growing impatient with the resistance, gave orders for a full-scale naval strike. March the 18th. Progressing towards the straits in 3 lines, the Allies began a heavy bombardment of the Turkish shores. Just when the ships seemed headed for a breakthrough, disaster struck. Under heavy bombardment from the Turkish forts, the French Bouvet and the British Irresistible and Ocean hit the mines laid by a Turkish ship named Nusrat and sank. At the end of the battle, 3 ships had been sunk, while 3 others were put out of commission. In return, nothing was achieved. The great, formidable British Navy had suffered an astonishing defeat at the hands of the sick man of Europe.
After the British attempt to force the Narrows was set back on the 18th of March, both the naval commander, Admiral John de Robeck, and the military commander, General Sir Ian Hamilton, realised that it would be necessary to make a landing to clear the European shore of the peninsula before the Navy could resume the attempt to sweep the Narrows.
Hamilton and his staff immediately began to devise plans for what was to be the greatest, most ambitious amphibious operation in world history until Normandy in World War II. After a month of careful planning, the Allies, under the protection of their naval bombardment, landed at Gallipoli on the morning of April the 25th. Australian and New Zealand troops, known as the Anzacs, landed at Aribunu, today called Anzac Cove. Not encountering any significant Turkish resistance, the Anzacs proceeded inward, up Çanak Bear.
Mustafa Kemal realised from the very first moment that the key to defending the whole of the Gaba Tepe position would be the hills which culminated around Koçuk Tepe and Çanak Bear. And he knew this before he set out, and set out with this knowledge that it was going to be absolutely essential that this particular position should be denied to the invading forces. When Mustafa Kemal arrived at Koçuk Tepe, he could see very little except the British ships out to shore. So he left the men that had come with him and moved down the hills towards Çanak Bear, where he found the small number of defenders moving back from the advancing Australians. He took the defenders, the Turkish forces, and he said to them, "You must turn and fight." And despite the fact that they complained they had no ammunition, he made them stop, put on their bayonets, lie down, and that in itself was enough to arrest the Australian movement northward up the hills.
While the Anzacs hesitated, Mustafa Kemal's troops reached the area and he engaged them in action, with himself fighting in the forefront. He knew that his chance to be the savior of his country had finally come. He would either prove to the world who Mustafa Kemal was, or would die trying. His fighting, with fanaticism and readiness to die, made his soldiers die on his orders. "I don't order you to fight, I order you to die. In the time it takes us to die, other troops can come and take our places." At the end of the day of fierce fighting and bravery on both sides, the Anzac advance had been stopped and Çanak Bear secured.
The way that he managed to keep it within Turkish hands on the 25th of April was in fact a defining moment of what took place at Anzac.
Becoming a full colonel in June, Mustafa Kemal was put in command of the whole northern front in August. He led a successful attack against the British and stopped their advance in the Suvla region further north. On the morning of August the 10th, during his decisive attack against the Anzacs, an event took place that was to change Mustafa Kemal forever.
In the course of the battle, shrapnel shell exploded and he was hit with a piece of shrapnel above the heart, but fortunately the shrapnel lodged in his watch, which he had in his breast pocket, and so he was not seriously wounded.
After this event in Gallipoli, there occurred a fit between internal belief that he was immortal